If you've ever considered visiting the Walt Disney World Resort, one of the decisions that you're going to have to make is whether you want to stay on property at one of the Walt Disney World Resort hotels or off property, somewhere out in town, outside the Walt Disney World Resort's perimeter, I suppose you could say. Now, this is one of those topics that leads to a lot of heated discussion. People have really strong opinions on where you should be staying and why, how much you should be paying, whether or not perks of staying at a particular place are actually worth it. And before I go any further, it's important to note that every family has different wants and needs. Right? Not every option is going to work for everybody, and not every option is going to be what everyone wants their vacation to look like. But still, if you're someone who's like me, you've tried to stretch a dollar whenever you can, cutting corners here and there, all the chatter about how affordable it can be to stay off property can be kind of enticing, right? You could save, according to what some people are saying, a ton of money. But is that the reality, or is that just people talking about their experience and what works best for them? We won't know until we crunch the numbers. And that's what we're going to do today. So here's the situation. I did a little bit of research with the goal of saving money in mind. We're going to look at 3 different properties today. One of them is a Walt Disney World Resort hotel. The other 2 are the most affordable accommodations in the Walt Disney World area that I was able to find. And we're going to see what the numbers look like. Of course, keeping everything in mind. But before we jump in, let's talk about the parameters of this trip. So for dates, we're looking at January 19th to the 23rd, 2026. We need a room that can house 4 adults. And during this trip, we're going to do 1 day at each of the 4 theme parks. Now, we're not going to look at the cost of theme park tickets as part of our number crunching today, but we do need to know that we're going to visit each of the 4 theme parks at least once, because that's going to factor into our overall cost, mainly getting to and from the theme parks if we're staying off property versus on property. Like I said, we're going to look at everything today, but first, let's take a look at our first option, Disney's All-Star Sports Resort. Disney's All-Star Sports is a Walt Disney World Resort hotel that's in their value category. This means it's one of the most affordable accommodations at the Walt Disney World Resort. During the dates that we're looking at today, the cost per night for Disney's All-Star Sports is about $136 plus tax. That brings our total to $619.73. Now, there are some perks to staying at a Walt Disney World Resort, including All-Star Sports in that value category, that you simply aren't going to get if you stay elsewhere, mainly off property. This is going to include free parking at the Walt Disney World theme parks, free transportation to and from the theme parks, early theme park entry, which is an additional 30 minutes that you have access to the park before day guests. I know some people don't think that this is that big of a deal. It's certainly not what it used to be, but it's still a leg up on day guests, and any extra time in the park is a good thing, at least in my opinion. There are also additional opportunities to book dining and early access to Lightning Lane. And these perks, again, might not necessarily seem like that big a deal to everybody. They might not be a big deal to you if you don't plan on doing dining reservations during your visit or using the Lightning Lane skip the line service available here at Walt Disney World. But if you do, this gives you a little bit of an edge compared to everybody else. Being able to book your dining not only 60 days in advance, which is standard for everybody, no matter who you are, but also 60 days plus the length of your stay, that can be the difference between grabbing that dining reservation you want and not. And you could say the same thing when it comes to Lightning Lane, whether we're talking about multi-pass, single pass, or premier pass. If you're staying at a Walt Disney World Resort hotel, again, including resorts in this value category, you can purchase your Lightning Lane option of choice a few days before the general public. And again, that might be the edge that you need to check a few more things off your to-do list. Now, I've personally stayed at the All-Star Resorts before, and I think that they're great. They're pretty spacious, despite being the smallest rooms on Walt Disney World property, but they're clean and convenience. I mean, you just can't beat staying at a Walt Disney World Resort hotel as opposed to staying off property for that convenience factor alone. And when you add the perks, I mean, I can't see a reason to not stay at an All-Star. But we have a few more places to check out, so let's make our way to the next location. The first off-property hotel that we're taking a look at today is called the Destiny Palms Hotel, Main Gate West. This hotel comes in at $48 per night, which is a total after taxes and fees of $238 for the duration of the stay. Now, there is no parking fee for the Destiny Palms, but there's also nothing included outside of the room. So one of the things that we have to keep in mind is what is it going to cost us to get from our hotel here to the theme parks. Now, we do have multiple options available to us. We can, of course, rent a car. We can go with a rideshare as well. And I did actually price out, if we were going to take a rideshare, what it would cost not only to the parks, but also to get back home. Now, when I priced this out, I looked at Lyft. That's the rideshare app that I have and I use when I do use rideshare services. It's also important to realize that I went off the pricing that's available to me right now, checking at different times of the day, but it's also the time of the year that it currently is, which is like mid-September 2025. So pricing may vary. Right? That's always the case anytime we talk about ride shares. But let's look at what the numbers look like, at least for me, based on my research. So to Magic Kingdom, it was $16.99 to get to the park, $23.99 to get home. Epcot was $17.66 and $21.67. Hollywood Studios was $16.77 and $19.72. And Animal Kingdom was $15.99 and a whopping $40.99 to get back. Now keep in mind, this does not include a tip. This just includes the cost of the ride. It's also not an upgraded vehicle or an upcharge for getting the next available vehicle. It's just the most affordable option. So that's something that you want to just keep in mind here. It also only includes one round trip. So if you plan on coming back to your hotel at some point midday, or you have to come back to your hotel, that's going to increase the overall cost of taking a rideshare, which for Destiny Palms, this hotel is going to be around $174 plus a $26 tip at that 15% range. Now, another option that's going to be available to you is renting a car and driving yourself to and from the parks throughout your stay. This gives you a little bit more freedom in terms of timing. You know, you don't have to pay per ride, so you can come to and from your hotel as much as you please without having to increase the price of transportation. But you will have to pay for parking, so we have to factor that into the cost as well, which is $30 per day. And you only have to pay once. If you want to come and go, you don't have to pay again. So we are going to factor that into the cost when it comes to renting a car. Now, I did some research trying to find the most affordable rental car that I could, which was $16 per day, but here's why we're not going with that option. This was a special, which meant we couldn't choose our car, and it could be a compact, according to what the website said. So I wanted to go with something that was a little bit more reliable, something that would guarantee that our traveling party of 4 adults and all of our luggage could make the trip. So the next best option was a midsize SUV coming in at about $24 per day. Now, when we add all of those numbers together, the cost of the rental car per day plus the bare minimum taxes and fees, we didn't get any upgrades here, and the parking fees at the Walt Disney World theme parks, it comes to around $299. Now, that's going to be the same number whether we talk about Destiny Palms or our next location, so keep that in mind. It's also more expensive than going the rideshare route, but we also have a little bit more freedom than going that route. So it's a lot to consider. But look, here's the thing. We're going to pull all this together here in a bit. Before we do, though, let's make our way over to our other off-property option, the Travelodge by Wyndham, Kissimmee, Orlando. This hotel is also $48 per night and doesn't charge for parking, but with taxes and fees, the total for our stay is $272. Now, just like with our last option, that includes the cost of the room, so there isn't anything else included in that price. And also, just like our last option, we need to take into consideration the cost to get to and from the parks. So let's look at our options for ride shares. Magic Kingdom is $12.99 and $16.99. Epcot, $13.83 and $16.99. Hollywood Studios, $10.99 and $16.75. Animal Kingdom, $11.81 and $17.85. This, again, doesn't include a tip. Total, that's about $118 with around an $18 tip. And again, that's one round trip. Now, the numbers aren't as bad for this location, and that's because it's much closer. We're still on 192, which is that main touristy thoroughfare in the Walt Disney World area, but this is so much closer than the last option was. Now, again, you also have the option of grabbing a rental car. The numbers haven't changed for that, so around $299, and that includes everything, which again is more expensive than taking a ride share, but gives you more freedom than taking a ride share. All right, so we've taken a look at all three options. We've talked about the basics. Now let's get into some of the more nitty-gritty and take a look at what these numbers all look like when we put them up against each other. because to understand the full total of what it's going to cost us to stay at any of these places, we have to factor in all of the other costs associated with staying there. So the cost of a rental car, the cost of a rideshare. Let's start with a rental car. Starting off at All Star Sports, the cost of the hotel is $619. We don't have to rent a car because we don't need one, and so that means the total for our stay is $619. For the Destiny Palms, the total for the stay alone was $238, and then there's $299 for that rental, ultimately bringing us to a grand total of $537. Travelodge is $272 for the room, again $299 for that car rental, and that brings us to a grand total of $571. Now, it's important to note, and I know some of you are going to mention this here in a second, well, how are you getting to and from the airport if you're staying at All Star Sports? Great question. Let's get into it. So if you're flying and you're flying into MCO, which is Orlando International Airport, you have a few different options for getting to your hotel depending on where you're staying. If you're staying at a Walt Disney World Resort hotel, you have MissZ Connect as an option. MissZ is a well-known company that provides shuttles to and from MCO and the Walt Disney World Resort hotels, as well as other Good Neighbor hotels. For those of you who have been visiting Walt Disney World for a while, MissZ previously operated Magical Express, and before that, MissZ was the go-to shuttle for people who were making their way between MCO and Walt Disney World. So a reliable company, one that, at least in my opinion, you can count on. You also have the option of taking a rideshare. A lot of people go this route, but there is another option as well, and that is using Lynx. Lynx is effectively the bus. It's public transportation, and they do offer rides from MCO to Disney Springs for $2 per person each way, which is kind of an unbeatable price. Now, of course, depending on where you're staying, if you decide to go this route, it might cost you a little bit more than $2 per person each way, mainly because you then have to get from Disney Springs to wherever it is that you're staying. If you're staying at a Walt Disney World Resort hotel, no problem. You can take a free Disney bus. But if you're staying elsewhere, you're still going to have to take a rideshare, but it might end up being more affordable than just taking a rideshare alone. But let's take a look at what all of these options cost when we stack them up together. So as you can see here, if you want to go the route of taking a rideshare to All Star Sports, it's going to cost you $89. That is round trip for those of you who are wondering, and that does include a tip. Of course, this is based on numbers that are available to us right now. It might be different during your visit. Going the route of taking Lynx, again for 4 adults, round trip is going to be $32, and MissZ Connect is a total of $134. Again, that's round trip for 4 adults. A rideshare to Destiny Palms is going to cost you $98. Using Lynx as well as a rideshare is going to cost you $81, and unfortunately MissZ Connect is not an option. For the Travelodge, it's $89 for the rideshare, $69 for Lynx, and of course, no option for MissZ Connect. So keeping that in mind, as well as the cost of taking a rideshare versus renting a car versus staying at a Walt Disney World Resort hotel and using Disney transportation, what do our totals look like? Pulling all of those numbers together for All Star Sports, if we use a rideshare to get to and from MCO, our grand total is $708. Using a rideshare along with Lynx is going to be $651, because don't forget, we don't have to get a rideshare from Disney Springs. We can use Disney transportation, so we cut some costs there. Of course, we don't have a total for a rental car. It's simply not necessary. But if we went the route of taking MissZ to and from the airport, our total is $753. For Destiny Palms, with ride shares, we're looking at about $536. If we opt to take a Lynx from the airport and then ride share from Disney Springs, it's $519. With a rental car, it's $537. And of course, we don't have a number for MissZ because it's not an available option. For the Travelodge, the rideshare option is going to bring our total to $496. A rideshare plus Lynx is $477. A rental car is going to be $571, and again, no option available for MissZ. Now, at the end of the day, what works best for you is going to depend on any number of factors. What are your wants, needs? What does your budget look like? And what do you want your vacation to look like? Also, what are you comfortable with? That's a really important one, especially when we're talking about some of these properties that come in at as low as $48 per night. Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I would not recommend either of the off-property locations that we took a look at today. I'm really not crazy about the location, especially if you're planning on taking ride shares and walking around to get food or whatever in the local area in the evenings. It's just not a place that I would be walking around at night. But those are my personal opinions, and your feelings might be different. And that's fine. You know, everyone has different limitations. I will say, though, there are a few other red flags that make these places not somewhere I would recommend. First, the reviews. They're not great. A lot of people talking about cleanliness, which is a big one for me. And I've also seen some people talk about what I just mentioned a second ago. It's not really the safest neighborhood. But another red flag for me is that neither of these places have clear signage. Sure, maybe there's a sign at the end of the road that says Travelodge, but there's nothing that says Travelodge or Destiny Palms, for that matter, on the building itself. And while, you know what, that might not necessarily be a big deal. It might even seem silly that that's a red flag to me, but I've stayed at enough places to know the things to look for, and that's one of them. I just don't feel good about recommending either of these places, and quite frankly, I wouldn't stay at either of them myself. And I say that as someone who has absolutely stayed at very cheap, probably very sketchy motels. Now, that aside, do I think that either of them are worth checking out because the savings is there and it's just unbeatable? No, absolutely not. Now, of course, like I've been saying this whole time, everyone's situation is different, everyone's wants and needs are going to be different, but for me, I don't think the savings are worth the sacrifice. But I'd love to hear from you guys. Have you stayed off property? Why have you stayed off property? Have you found the savings to be just that significant and that's why you went that option? And what were some of the things that you had to weigh in order to make that option the one that was right for you? We'd love to hear your thoughts, so pop them in a comment down below. But all right, that's all for now. Thanks so much for hanging out with me, and I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say. Until next time, bye.